All right, so we're going to get into speaker view mode so we can have a real discussion here momentarily, but I want to just welcome and thank all of the CEOs and leaders here who are going to be talking about leadership in the next normal right now. So we've got Torres, the Executive Director of the Kindness Campaign, Gabe Cooper, CEO of Virtuous, Najeed Kassam, CEO of Keela. Congratulations, Najeed, just had a new baby. Thank you for being here. I know that you're probably tired, and so we really appreciate you joining us for this discussion. And Shawn Olds, CEO of Boodle. Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Amazing.
Very good. Hey, thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Good to have you guys here. All right, so let's do a quick 30-second intro for everyone. Janet, let me start with you. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and the Kindness Campaign.
Hi, everybody. I'm an executive director of, I would say, not as small, but we're thriving. I hate using the word small, but we're a thriving nonprofit here in Austin, Texas. And we serve, actually, we're a national brand. We're headquartered here in Austin. And our main focus is to provide social emotional learning curriculum to students from pre-K to 5th grade. And we've been around since 2016, and we are so blessed that we have been able to provide to the entire Austin Independent School District of 40,000 students and 82 elementary schools our social emotional learning in school curriculum. And I'm really excited to talk about how we had to pivot, and we'll talk about that later on, but I'm very happy to be here and to be at the forefront of bringing emotional health tools to students all across the country and to adults.
Awesome. Yeah, so important. I might need to get some of your tools for my kids. We'll talk about that later. Thank you, Janet. It's good to see you again. Janet and I used to work together back when I lived in Austin.
Right.
All right, let's go with Gabe. Gabe, hello, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, Gabe Cooper. I'm the CEO and founder of Virtuous Software. We are in Phoenix, Arizona. Virtuous is a responsive CRM and marketing automation platform. We help mid-size and large nonprofits build better personal relationships with their donors at scale. And so excited to be here.
Awesome, cool. And Gabe just came out with a book. I'll give you all the info for that later. It's a good book. I've got a copy. I'm working my way through it right now. All right, Najeed, hello, welcome.
Hey, Taylor, how you doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm good. I'm really grateful to be here. It's nice to be doing some work. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much. My name is Najeed Kassam. I kind of wear a couple of hats. I'm going to talk about one, which is you've spoken about. I'm the CEO at Keela, where we help, I'm going to borrow Janet's term, thriving nonprofits, small to medium-sized organizations with their CRM and their and intelligence tools. So it's like a BI tool with a CRM specifically for small to medium thriving nonprofits. I'm also the executive director of a Canadian National Public Policy Institute. And so I wear the ED hat as well, and hope to speak from both perspectives. A little bit about myself. As Taylor mentioned, I'm a new dad. I have a little boy who arrived about a week and a bit ago. I'm also a recovering corporate lawyer, now dedicated to building the nonprofit space.
Very cool. I didn't know that last fact. So interesting.
I am, in fact,
yeah, recovering. Yeah, exactly. I understand. Well, yeah, no, again, congratulations on the baby. Drink lots of coffee, watch lots of Netflix. You'll get through it. And I really appreciate that you have both perspectives as an ED and as a CEO in these different environments. So we'll get into that. And then lastly, hello, Shawn. Hello, how are you, Mr. Matrix? You've got your Matrix background there going on today.
Good, Taylor. How are you doing?
Doing well.
So thanks so much for having me. We're a pleasure to be here. I'm Shawn Olds, CEO, co-founder of Boodle AI. We are a predictive analytics company that helps nonprofits from nascent to thriving to over $100 million a year, really narrow in on donors who have a true fit and affinity for their cause so that they find more lifetime donors rather than falling into the 80% of new donors churning every year. And as additional roles that I do for 25 years now, I've always served on nonprofit boards. Started out right out of college in the youth education space, after the Army migrated to some veteran service organizations. So Boodle was the opportunity to take what has always been on the kind of extracurricular side and merge it with my tech startup experience for 20 years and actually only do one job instead of multiple ones.
Awesome. Cool. Well, all right. Thank you, everyone. Amazing backgrounds, amazing examples of leadership that you guys have. And I know you are all working on helping new teams pivot. Some of you are pivoting into virtual work experiences now, where you used to going into an office. Some of you have been virtual, and now it's still different being virtual versus now and versus then. I know, I speak from that experience. So let's start with Janet. And Najeed, you chime in here too with your executive director hat on. You know, Janet, you lead a nonprofit organization. Like, what's going through your mind right now when it comes to even just like the daily routines and the daily conversations with your team? What's kind of like happening there on the ground?
Well, as an organization that focuses on social emotional curriculum, you know, we all walk our talk here of, self-awareness, emotional awareness, empathy, and community. And those are our, four main learning pillars. And definitely we all live by it. So for me, the first and foremost thing, of course, was the mental health and health of my teammates. And so one of the things that was really important to me is that we were still, in early March, even until like the mid-March, we were still living, without the social distancing really and the shelter in place. I mean, we were all ready to go into our first South by Southwest EDU with this huge mega, which for a thriving nonprofit, to find the right sponsor to help us and to put our own money in, that was something that at that moment in time, which was supposed to happen March 8th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, I was already concerned about, my team, and especially I have two teammates who are pregnant right now. So again, what came to my mind in February, early March, and of course right now is the continuing mental health and health of my team so they can be productive. And I think the most important thing for us is staying connected, staying grounded, and being vulnerable with each other. That has been really key to us working, and as we'll talk about later on, how we've pivoted, because most of our work is in school. We do a lot of virtual programming in schools with middle school, high schools, and elementary school. We don't teach the curriculum. We provide the curriculum to teachers and counselors. So we were not like interacting with students, but we on a daily basis. But we up until early March, we were in school doing our programming. So to me, again, for me as leading an organization is just taking care of their mental health. And we've worked remote most of the time anyway. So pivoting to a remote was not difficult for us, but we did up the amount of interaction that we have. And most people are like, wow, that's a lot of meetings 3 times a week that we touch base with each other. But it's more about creating that community and support for each other, because we are at a time where we have been really working hard to create new things, and I'll talk about it a little later about how we've gone online and how within 72 hours we accepted the challenge from Austin ISD to provide them with in-school curriculum. Another thing is, and I'll end with, revenue streaming, sustainability, fundraising. Been really blessed that we did have a rainy day fund. That I know a lot of my cohorts out there are struggling, but we are blessed to have the hard costs of our organization covered until the end of the year. But that doesn't stop us from continually discussing about fundraising, the new, the next normal, like as you said, Taylor, about virtual galas and fundraising, how that affects us. And I'd love to hear from my colleagues on this panel about how that, how can that help a thriving nonprofit. And also, and when it comes to cash flow and protection of this organization, we actually went forward with our first credit card with charity charge. And I know it seems weird at this time to be like, wow. I mean, but we only worked out of the debit card. And so at this time where there's a lot of, it could be a lot of scamming and fraud, we actually went with this free program that's allowing us to have like some feeling of calm when it comes to cash flow, to things that, that we maybe not expecting that we would have to use, a card with. And I love the fact that, it's a cash back too. So I'm constantly thinking about new revenue streams, and I'll talk about that a little later. But to me, those were like the biggest things that were hitting me is mental health and health.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that you said that about mental health. I think that's important. And it's important both as a leader to be focused on the mental health of your team and making sure that, I've seen, I think Julia, one of our MCs, has tweeted about this several times. You're not like just working from home. You're something about how it's like productivity. Like, don't be so hung up on like crazy productivity right now.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a message to make sure like the team feels. I mean, it's not like a, hey, just sit around and watch Netflix all day sort of an environment.
Right.
But like you said, the time is now to say, even in your situation, we've got funding through the end of the year, but that doesn't mean we should stop. But I think also there's a balance between realizing that there's a lot of stress and new things that everyone's having to think about and deal with personally as they cope with what's happening in the world. And that's something that we as leaders have to be mindful of. I'm curious to get other folks on the line. So we can talk about, okay, we've got to protect the mental health of the team. How do you cope with your own mental health as a leader?
Taylor, before we jump to that, can I just make a quick comment on something? I think, as we've sort of made this transition, I think the currency of trust amongst our teams is so much more important now than it's ever been before. And I think that, whether at Better Canada or at Keela, I'm really lucky because I have incredible teammates. And so when you don't get to knock on their door or holler at them across a room, you have to trust that they're doing the things that they need to be doing. And so, being a little bit vulnerable, making sure that you're a little bit over accountable, making sure that you have really strong transparency, but ultimately that all operates on this currency of trust. And so I think it's important for us as executive directors or as CEOs or whoever in leadership positions to be cognizant and reminded of the fact that trust is maybe more important than ever now.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It's true. And that's one of the things that I think was so hard for many people who are used to being in the office and doing the pop in and you see everyone there. And now you can't just pop in, you don't see your people. And so trust is critical. And second off, Janet, you mentioned this, you're meeting more regularly. And while you feel like that might be overkill, it's really not, because you're not popping in anymore. You're not having the drive-bys and, the walking to the office. So let's go to Gabe next. Gabe, you guys were also in an office and now you're remote, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
How are you? Let's continue to tap into that trust and go around the table a little bit on that. How are you building that trust? How are you as a leader coping with the mental uncertainty of everything?
Yeah, I think Janet's points are great. I think trust is a critical piece of it. I think we've done a few really practical things, like all of our teams have moved to daily stand-ups just because people miss that community and connection. So we're doing daily stand-ups on Zoom with all of the teams, which is really helpful. It's crushed my calendar, but I kind of set up one-on-one temperature checks with the entire team. And so they can grab 30-minute blocks on my calendar just to be able to check in. So some of it's just really practical. How do you maintain that community? We do happy hours twice a week now, like on Zoom, which is just amazing and fun. And so I think all of that can be super valuable. The one thing we've seen that has been really important is a lot of our goals as nonprofits, or in our case as a tech company, have changed, right? Like what the projections we had for what we're going to do this month or this quarter or whatever have all changed. And so we've really moved to micro goals. And so I don't want my team thinking so much about, hey, what are my quarterly numbers or goals that I want to get to, but what are my micro goals today and this week? I feel like in a changing environment, having those very sort of minute, achievable goals for today and this week, help keep people on track and help them not get disoriented with the changing landscape. And so that's been a really valuable thing for us.
Yeah, so breaking it down into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
Is anybody else doing that or finding anything else effective to build that trust?
I think I spoke. Sorry, go ahead, please. No, please.
I was going to say, I mean, like Gabe, it does take up time on the calendar. But I had someone 2 weeks ago. I get asked every day to do Zoom calls, but someone was just the way they framed it. They said, "Let's do a Zoom coffee," and they literally brought a coffee, and it was almost like we were at a Starbucks. We started out talking like you would at a Starbucks. So many Zoom calls, you just dive right into business and you go do it. And so what I've started doing is I'm literally doing with every person on the team lunch every day. I do a Zoom lunch. So they bring a sandwich or whatever, and we sit and we don't talk about work. We just talk about how the family's doing, what they're doing to get out of the house, and that ability to kind of check up, how is their mental health doing? How are they doing in coping with, because half of our team was remote, and a lot of people think, well, remote workers, it's easy for them. But what people don't realize is remote workers before were able to leave the house afterwards. They were able to go work at Starbucks if they wanted to, but they can't do that now. And so it's a little bit of a psychological play for them too, that they're now stuck at the place they work all day long.
Yeah.
Sort of just building on that.
Something to say
Yeah.
too?
At the top of every meeting that I have, to Gabe's point, I actually do a mental health check-in. So it's on the agenda. It's literally called, I remember yesterday I sent with our team members, and I said, mental health check-in. Like, I really want to be really clear about that. And I think, for too long in our society, and I think Jan will have something to say about this, mental health has been really ignored, right? And so, your back doesn't hurt, you don't have a cough, okay, you're healthy, and so, but when you're isolated, when there's that feeling of isolation, which is difficult at the best of times, just being there and supporting that, I think, is really important. The second thing, and I want to comment on something else that Gabe said, and I think he's absolutely right. With the landscape constantly changing, I think it's really important that as it changes, that we communicate as leaders the changes to our teams. If we want them to be rallying behind us, whether it's about a fundraising goal or a targets number or a product thing or a customer support or anything, a programming issue, if the landscape changes and we don't communicate that to our teams, when they don't perform, it's our fault, not theirs. And I think a lot of times we sort of assume that, if it's in my head, it's in their head. But especially when we're sitting in these little offices, hundreds of kilometers or miles apart from each other, maybe that those almost over communications are really going to help to fill the disconnects. And I think ultimately increase people's mental health, make sure we're all on the same page together, and most importantly, help us move towards actually achieving them instead of these things that we're going to miss because we're not in the same physical space together. And I think that's something that we found, and I'll be the first to say we did not do a good job of it when this first started. When we first moved to this, it was, we were under communicating, especially these changing landscapes. And then we made that change, and I give credit to one of the other leaders on my team who pushed me, and it's made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, to Shawn's point too, I speak from experience. I've worked remotely for 12, 13 years now. And it's true. I mean, I'm so used to being able to leave my house and go work at a coffee shop. And the fact that so it's funny, when this all started, to your point, Najeed, at the beginning, I was like, I'm built for this. I was made for this day. I've been prepping my whole career for this. But now I'm like, I really miss the coffee shop, and just like some human interactions. So we need to be mindful of that, whether you've always been a remote employee or you're new to it. There's different ways people on our teams are adjusting to this and going through this.
Yeah. So I just want to make one last point, Taylor, and I think it's very important for those who are now, especially the parents who are now seeing, I'm not a parent, but I have teammates who have children, and I have teammates who are about to have children. And the idea that, work is normal at home. We're not working we're working at home during a crisis, and they have children, you have children, you're trying to homeschool. And so what I've been hearing from my other nonprofit colleagues across the country is that some are having to quit their jobs. because of the childcare issue, even though the parents and the caregivers are home. So just as another one more, thing that, please keep in mind as leaders, either, be it for-profit or nonprofit, that, everyone has a different reality and everyone has a different norm now. And just to take a little more that, not everyone may be able to, like I said, I'll say that later, but be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and then judge others for how they're dealing with this, and just be open to the fact that people, may be struggling with just home care, elder care or child care at home. So that was my last point.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And speaking as a parent, there's things that I struggle with. I'm curious to get other people's perspectives on this, because my kids are home, and basically just like feed yourselves and do your own thing, because I'm working and I'm trying to balance it and the home care. So then it's like, not only do you have the trying to get my job done, I'm trying to make sure like I've got finances in order and everything, like all these things. There's also this guilt as a parent right now where I'm like, I know y'all are not getting all your schoolwork done, and I know you're getting neglected. Is anybody else dealing with that? Because that's something that either as a parent you're dealing with, or as a, the boss of people who have kids who are dealing with that. And anybody else have some perspective on that? I'm curious.
I think, like, to Jenna's point, just being incredibly patient, understanding that everybody's dealing with this differently. So I have 5 kids that are all homeschooling right now, and so it's a bit of a train wreck at our house. But also employees that don't, that have 2 folks working, and so now they're trying to manage sort of childcare and parenting. And so just as a leader acknowledging, look, I'm going to have kids run across the background of a Zoom call sometimes. I'm going to have freak out moments where somebody gets up and leaves a Zoom call. And that's okay right now. Like, you can't get frustrated. You can't get overwhelmed with that. You just have to understand that's where we're at in our current moment. And that person that's dealing with that at home is probably twice as stressed about it as you are. And so I think just a ton of patience and empathy, knowing that our teams are dealing with that in really real ways.
And I think on top of that, a lot of our especially if we have, a lot of young folks who live in these little apartments, right? And Vancouver's are one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. And so the reality that not every household is set up to have 2 people on Zoom calls all day. And that's okay. And we have to, as leaders, have to be patient and supportive. If maybe somebody can't use a video, maybe, because they don't have space for it, or there's somebody else on a call, or we have to be flexible. The idea that we do have to be, empathetic, but also just flexible, I think that's just the reality of it. But also that this too shall pass. And I think that's important. This may be the next normal, but it's not always going to be us stuck in 600 square feet apartments for the rest of our lives. And so that because this is a temporary thing, that because we weren't set up for this necessarily in this way, that when it passes, things will go back to whatever that new normal is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Taylor,
absolutely.
just to add one last thing on what Gabe said. The other thing is leaders that we can do is set the example. My co-founder has a 6-month-old little girl, and I have an 18-month-old little boy, and we've both taken calls with them. So we let the team know, hey, it's okay. You don't need to pretend like you're not sitting at home. We understand where you're at, and we're going to do it, and it's fine for you to do it too. But
that goes back to trust, right, Shawn? Like, if you trust them to do their jobs and do them incredibly well with the vigor and passion that they would in the office, but the fact that you have a toddler on your lap doesn't affect your brain, right? Like, it doesn't affect your passion for your work. And I think it does go back to that trust. At least that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, exactly. A lot of leaders on this call with young children. Yeah, we're all dealing with it, aren't we? I mean, you have the newest one, Najeed. You've got a week old, right?
It's not a competition. I think Gabe might take it with 5 of them. Good Lord.
Yeah.
I'd put all 5 on one Zoom call and just get it over with, right? That's it.
Gabe's winning with numbers. Yeah.
I think that guilt is a really interesting one, and I'm curious how those, it's you want to be with your kid. At least I do. And I'm sure Shawn, 18 months is when they get fun, right? So it's like such a pull to want to be there, but being able to carve that out with that flexibility is something that I know I'm learning. I know there are a bunch of staff that I work with that have kids that are trying to find that balance and be kind to yourself, right? You're going to screw it up a few times, and that's okay. And that's not really a screw up. It's an opportunity to not screw it up in the future, or screw it up a little less. And, I think that's, we don't do a good job in our society of being kind to ourselves and as leaders, allowing people to make those mistakes, knowing that it's probably not going to affect our bottom lines or our donor dollars or our programming realistically. And so I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's okay to just accept that everyone's getting very real. We're seeing into people's lives a lot more than normal. And in a way, it's been fun. I have to say, my kids have definitely made appearances in webinars, and I've had people tell me that was the best part of the webinar. I'm like, well, I'm glad that what I said mattered. At least you think my kids are cute, right? But it's something that we're all dealing with. And so, the idea that we're all in this together and being patient. And I feel for people who are in those tiny apartments. I'm glad you mentioned that too. Like, you're in such a confined space. I'm glad I've got a bit more space at my house, and I'm like really grateful for that, because I've thought about friends who live in, big cities and high rises and small apartments. And I'm like, man, that's really, with two people on Zoom calls. So, we're running a little bit over on this one, but I've put some padding at the end of the day. So I want to go for just about 5 more minutes here with you guys. I think this has been a good discussion. I've been seeing a lot of people. I'm watching over here on the chat, some good resources that participants are dialing in and letting us know. ActiveMinds.org. They've got a lot of information up on their website, it looks like, for mental health resources. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And then the hubct.org, Coping with Corona blog series. That looks good. I'll read that and check that out. So thanks for everyone who's typing in those resources, and for the resources that your organizations are putting out to help with this is really good. Let's really quick go around the horn, and I want to get some examples from each of you on maybe what your organization, aside from the mental health stuff and, all of like the personal things that we're dealing with as leaders and leaders of people, what interesting things maybe have you done, or have you seen an organization you work with do to kind of like say, hey, I'm going to rise to the occasion and embrace this moment, and here's how I'm going to do it. Janet, you mentioned getting a credit card and doing some things. Tell us a little bit more about what you did.
Sure. So I think what's very important is, sorry, my headphones. The most important thing we've done is within 72 hours, almost 3 weeks ago, we were given the challenge from Austin Independent School District to provide in-home schooling tools and curriculum. And so we weren't set up for that. It was always a dream that, yes, one day we'll go digital, we'll be online. This has forced us, and in a good way, to get us into a place where we wanted to be, that we just didn't make the time or have the time because we're so small in terms of number of people. So we launched today our online free resources at tkckindness.org /TKC online, and I'll send that to you, Taylor, so you can share it with everybody. Okay. And it's a free resource where we took some of our hard curriculum that's in school and we've made them virtual. We also have what we call Enoughy TV, who our mascot is, his name is Enoughy. Our core message is I am enough. So, and also, how do we provide volunteer opportunities for people who want to volunteer with us but can't because we're not doing events? So we've been really nimble, and I am so proud of the incredible of our founder and CEO, the person who writes our curriculum, everyone from social media. We've also done our Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. We have a meetup in Storytime that's based on our 4 pillars, and it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Instagram at TKC Kindness. And so and everything relating to our essential learning pillars and making it accessible. So that has been huge for us, like amazing where we are. The other thing that I think is really important is how do we pivot on a fundraising level and on our gala that we have it scheduled for November. And we're doing what many others are doing is but we will be doing a virtual fundraiser gala. And I think this is where, we need the help of the tech companies out there who help with nonprofit fundraising. This is new for us. We've never done this. And a lot of the platforms out there that we're seeing are not really, they're starting to think about it. Like even event companies who were always doing events in person, now they're trying to help us with the virtual side. So that's going to be a longer term. We have a plan. We're trying to fill out that plan. And then the third thing that we're doing is creating more revenue streams for ourselves that is in addition to our fundraising. Fundraising and donors will never go away. It's just a little different right now, and the future and how we're navigating those individuals and our sponsorships with corporations. But how do we create, sustainable revenue streams like selling our curriculum to in families that are trying to do homeschooling? So, and we're about to launch that because right now we only have the curriculum in schools. So how do we provide that to now families who are so critical? We have the free website now, which is great. We're going to keep building that out, and then the revenue stream. So we've been very, very busy the last 4 weeks.
Yeah. Well, your organization is incredibly lucky to have you as a leader. I know you are someone who's flexible and agile and smart and figures things out. So they're really lucky to have you. And it's awesome to see that you are just overcoming the challenges and figuring out, okay, well, we're gonna figure out the software, right? We maybe don't know how to do it right now, but we're gonna figure it out. And I think that's awesome. I did put a link into the chat. I think hopefully I got that right, tkckindness.org. Thanks, Janet. Really appreciate that. What about you, Shawn? Any interesting organizations that you work with where you're seeing like a cool pivot or maybe something, an organization you're on the board of?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things organizations I'm seeing are doing is really thinking not just tactically, but strategically. I'm probably going to mess this up, but since you messed up a quote yesterday, I'm going to call it okay. I remember seeing an article like 6 years ago that CEOs always mess this quote up, but it was the Gretzky quote of, skate to where the puck is going, not where it's been. What I like to see is a lot of the clients that we're working with right now, that's what they're doing. They're solving the issues that they have, but they're really saying, and Janet just gave a great example. She's looking at credit cards. That's not something she's going to get rid of. That's going to help her in cash flow and perpetuity. And having organizations really solve the issues they have now, but also look strategically to what they need to do. It was one of the reasons, I've shared with you, we did the Net 180 offer. It's not something investors in a startup want to see you kill your cash flow. But we're talking to a number of clients who lost access to galas, lost access to races, lost access to face-to-face meetings, but understood that they could use a tool like ours remotely and wanted to use it, but they're in budget freezes. So we wanted to think a little bit more strategically and allow them to be able to get on the platform without paying for it. And I think that's and I see the same thing in the nonprofits I'm sitting on the board of. They've used this. They're one of the first nonprofits I've met with that actually built a technology platform. So the Coda Support built something called Patriot Link that was funded by Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation over 3 years. And they're using this to really start to pivot. Okay, well, how do we use this to evolve the technology even more? And it's bringing some great opportunities to it. I loved your comment yesterday about how mortality kind of causes us to appreciate what we have. I'm a glass half full guy. I think we're going to emerge from this a lot stronger, and I really like to see what the organizations are doing to not just better themselves today and get through it, but to really evolve into stronger organizations once we emerge to the next normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Shawn, I mess up quotes all the time. So as you talk to me more, you'll get to know that. But
I'm sure I messed up
the way I look at it is I wore my It's All Good shirt awesome. Today because, that's just, we got to roll with it, people. It's all good. We'll be fine. you're right. Adjusting mortality is something that I actually, for me, it helps me just confront it and say, it's all good. It's all good. We'll figure it out. All right, Najeed, let's hear something interesting from you, and then we'll wrap it up with Gabe, and we'll move on to our next topic after that. This has been really good. I hope people have been enjoying this.
So I'm going to go one of each hats. The first one I'm going to talk a little bit about is stewardship. People aren't going away. They might just be a little quieter than usual. So a lot of people's pocketbooks are whatever the digital version of a pocketbook is, are a little tighter than they used to be. And so maybe I think not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and not forgetting about the importance of the relationships we have with our existing stakeholders, whether they're funders, whether they're, people who support us with, community advocacy, whether they support us in volunteers, whatever they might be. You may not be able to buy them a cup of coffee, but do a Zoom call. Just check in with them. Just make sure that they're okay. And not only do you have the positive benefit of reminding them that, X organization exists, we're still here, we're not going anywhere, but you don't need to say like, please give us money every single time. That stewardship can be done it can be a simple little thing that makes a huge difference. Just checking in. And I think that's going to build continue to build the long-term foundations you have with all those folks that support you. With the other hat, one of the things I've noticed from a lot of people we've been talking to is when you're stuck in the house, you have time to do stuff you haven't had time to do before. Clean up your data, sort your volunteers into different buckets, reorganize your fridge, whatever it might be. You have time to do it, and I think that's exciting because whether it's about software or programming, whether it's about your internal protocols, take the opportunities and actually do that, because like Shawn said, that we're going to come out stronger, but in order to come out stronger, we're going to need to lay that foundation and put the work in, and we actually may have the time or at least the bandwidth to do it right now, and I think that's exciting. So don't forget to steward, but also think about some of that foundational stuff.
Yeah. I went through old boxes in my house one Saturday recently that had been needing to be gone through for years, and I was dreading it. And then when I did it, I actually felt really good. And I found things like paper towels and soap, and I was like, this is gold. I'm so glad I did this. All right, great tips. Gabe, let's round it out with you.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that we've seen. I mean, our organizations are doing amazing things right now to be empathetic to donors, to make calls, and it's amazing to see. There's a couple of things that we've seen in-house that have been successful. One is creating a Slack group for our customers, and in a lot of cases, we have to explain to our customers what Slack is, which is, I think, a really good and healthy thing. But inviting our customers to join a Slack group where they can trade resources on how to manage through this current crisis, how they can fundraise through, and just support one another. And so that's been a really valuable thing for us. The other thing we've done is just because our team has more time, opening up blocks of like 30 minutes of free consulting. And a lot of this free consulting time is, how do you do a virtual gala? Like, is that a thing? What tools should I be using? And so there's a lot of coaching that organizations need adjusting to this next normal. And so opening up that consulting time just to have those conversations and help people navigate, both of those have been really valuable, and things that I've seen my team do that are amazing to just build that empathy and trust with the folks that we serve. I think it's provided a bit of an example for our customers who are now seeing it. Oh, these guys are doing free 30-minute blocks of consulting. I should be doing that with my donors. And yeah, you totally should. And so, we've seen both those as really valuable kind of steps.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I love, just to go back to, I think a couple of you guys mentioned this, like bring a coffee. I mean, have a virtual coffee, set it up as something that feels more personable, whether that's with your donors, a great point, Gabe, or your staff, and let people know that you're ready to show up and have a conversation in the same way that if you were actually going to your local coffee shop or Starbucks or sitting down for lunch. So This has been great. Thanks, everyone. I know we went a little bit over. I'm going to pivot the schedule a little bit. We'll figure it out. It's all good. I really appreciate all of you leaders here. I think you had some amazing advice. You're all people who I look up to as stellar leaders who are really just rising above right now in a challenge. So Janet, Najeed, Shawn, Gabe, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Okay.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks,
Thanks for
folks.
having us, Taylor.
Yeah.
Stay safe, everybody.
All right.
Stay safe.
Take care of those babies.
Yeah.